Simon, welcome to Action A Go Go. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Great. It's great to be here, Derek. Nice to meet you.
Likewise, legendary director of Con Air, Expendables 2. I'm sure as an action-focused guy, you can understand why I'm super excited.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, it's all in the name. Action a go-go.
There you go. Perfect. So yeah, we're here to talk about Old Guy, which will be released February 21st on digital and in theaters. And yeah, very good movie. Had a chance to watch it, and did just want to start out with what brought you to this film?
Well, most of them, it's the script. If the script's no good, there's no point, starting out with it. So there has to be something about it that draws you in, even if it's not perfect yet. It's either the world draws you in or the character draws you in. In this case, it was the character because the world of a hitman is very familiar. I've done a Hitman movie. Lots of people have seen Hitman movies, and they usually always, follow the same trope of the ruthless machine, supervision. No dialogue, eats, sparingly, has no friends or relatives. I think we've seen a lot. They're absolutely perfect. And this was the exact opposite. There was a guy who was losing his skills, couldn't shoot straight, getting on there. Also, the sort of hitman part of it was really a day job to pay for his partying lifestyle. So, even though he's in his 60s, he still wants to live like he did in his 20s and refuses to give up that lifestyle of party, drink, drugs, women. And, but he's a lovely guy. He's got a great sense of humor. You'd got sort of guy you'd want to hang out with and have a good time. He's the opposite of most hitmen. You would never get. You'd think he was in construction or a plumber or electrician or something, someone, ordinary and interesting, but fun to be with. And, then along comes this protege, this apprentice he has to train up. And like all jobs, apprentices exist and have to come along and need training. But Danny isn't ready to give up, his world, his job. He still thinks he can do it, but this kid played by Cooper Hoffman is, his worst nightmare. He's a Gen Z, gender fluid dressing health freak who his whole life is just being a hitman. He has no outside life. So, obviously character and Cooper's character are never going to get along. But, that's the fun. That's putting these two opposites, the boomer and the Gen Z kid together and, trying to get as many jokes out of them as possible and as much conflict. And Lucy Liu, who we've seen in a million great action movies, is there as the referee. And she is, somebody that can see good in both of them, but also, doesn't want this lifestyle anymore, wants to move on. She's the one that wants to change. They're both stuck in a rut. So it's really those three characters that drew me to the story. And, the in between this these arguments and these funny conversations, because it's basically a road movie. They're driving in a car and chatting about, all this relationship stuff and how to live life. But in between, they're going out on hits and doing contract killing, and that's getting caught up in a conspiracy between crime bosses. And so there's all that stuff going on, but it's sort of ancillary to the dynamic of two guys stuck in a car arguing and hating each other. But with the life and death stakes going on outside.
Absolutely. You're doing a great job. I don't really need to ask too many questions. You pretty much laid everything out, but
That's right.
which is fantastic. So you touched on a bunch of great points. I sort of related to the film. I don't know if you can see these grays creeping in on the side. So I appreciate the dynamic. You see these young whippersnappers come through. It's very relatable in that sense for me. But I mean, you have Christoph Waltz here. I mean, you've worked with heavy hitters pretty much your entire career, from what I could tell, or at least the meat of it, like what I mentioned before. What did he bring to the table here? What was his process like with this film?
Well, Christoph is a pro. He's a very accomplished actor. We've seen him. We you kind of tend to think he's been around, for 30 years, but of course his career was sort of later in his life that hit the big sort of Hollywood films. But before that, he'd done theater and endless television and films all over the world. So he's a very experienced actor. So he comes to the table with a huge toolkit of everything, been everywhere. There's nothing that he can't do, or nothing he hasn't seen. So that's great. It's like having a very experienced pilot or experienced heart surgeon. You can feel very relaxed and confident. There's going to be no scares. He's nothing's going to phase him. And he's going to have worked it all out. And weeks before we were discussing the script, we had conversations about things he liked and didn't like about it, and where he wanted to go with the character. And so um, it's just working with someone who's really good at what they do is a real pleasure. When you have a carpenter come around the house and they build something and you go, my God, that was well built. You admire the profession. And it's the same with a great actor. You watch them, you go, oh, that the way you put that scene together, was just like lovely to watch. And that's the pleasure for me. I can relax a bit because, the actors are doing the heavy lifting, and I just have to make sure they're in an environment that they can do their best work, because I'm certainly not going to tell them anything or teach them anything, or I can tell them like what's happening in the scene before and what's happening in the scene afterwards, so they kind of know where to put themselves in the story. But other than that, with someone like Christoph Waltz, you sit back and watch because it's a masterclass, really.
Yeah, I imagine if you try and bully him a little bit, he'll just pull out his two Oscars and start waving them in front of
Yeah.
you. Ask him if you want to.
Well, actually,
What about that?
that's the exact opposite. He's so humble about that side of it. He wouldn't pull out his Oscars. He'll pull out some document that was written 2,000 years ago about
Oh,
drama, and tell you why a scene should be the way it is, because they worked it out in ancient Greece to be like this. I don't think he's got much time for the modern Hollywood Oscar thing. He's more interested in where it all came from in Greek, drama and Greek tragedy than that. So that's the difference. He's a very intellectual approach to it, but also a very down to earth, because it is a job to him and it's a craft that he's very good at. And I said, it's like being a really good carpenter or something like that. And so yeah, there's no pretension about his acting. It's very down to earth.
excellent, excellent. And I was trying to watch some interviews before, and you talked about maybe embracing ad-libbing or being more creative on set. Was that a factor in this? Like, did Christoph or Cooper get to get creative, or did they really want to stick to the script as it was?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always open to that kind of thing. I mean, as long as we get the script, because we know what we're going, and then we can play around with it as much as possible. If there's time, often, especially on smaller films, there's not a lot of time, to play around. But a couple of times in this, yeah, definitely, there's sequences where there's a script, but then as a director, what you do is you try and enhance the visuals around that. So there might be linking material between scenes that you want to tell some of the story visually. So I would do things like that, and then I might just have the actors. So there's a scene where they're walking across a the tide's gone out in a river and they're having to walk across mud for miles and miles, and I just had some beautiful shots of them walking through mud, and I wanted to tell that story, and I said I'll just talk to each other because I wanted them to look like they're talking. Now, I would never necessarily was going to use the dialogue, but it's being recorded anyway, and of course when I got it, listening to it, it's like it's actually really good what they're saying. So that goes in the movie. So yeah, that scene was ad libbed, and a couple other places there's tweaks here and there, but you try and get the script as close as possible beforehand. In this situation, if it was like a comedy or something, then you can ad lib five different punchlines to the same gag, and you never know which one's going to be best. But I always leave a little bit, try and plan as much as possible, but leave like 20% space for changes, because you might have a brilliant idea on the day, or the actor has a brilliant idea, because it's the first time you've been in that situation with a real set or the real location and everybody really together. You're in the costumes, you're in, and you suddenly realize, God, actually, I would say this, not that. So yeah, you always leave a little bit of room for improv.
Excellent. And maybe we could wrap up with just you mentioned Cooper and Lucy. Maybe just talk a little bit about Cooper Hoffman, son of legendary Seymour Hoffman and whatnot. Big shoes to fill, of course. What was his experience like?
Well, that was the hardest part to cast, because it's obviously has to be someone young and by definition inexperienced, because nobody that age will have done have a body of work that proves that they're great movie stars. And Cooper had just done one movie before this, which happened to be a brilliant movie, and he was incredible, part in it. But very fresh, and that was exciting because this is a brand new actor that you're hoping is going to be great and ends up being terrific. And you go, well, I was there at the beginning, when he started, and I'm going to see him for the next 30 years develop into something fantastic. And he was so brave and was, listening to Christoph and Christoph's advice. And, but then basically in an amazing performance and trying anything. So I would have 5 different versions of a scene with him that I could then play with in editing. And that was the fun part as well, because that was exciting to be able to have those different types of versions of his character to play with in each scene that I could then in the editing room put together and a whole different thing from having a very on-set one type of performance.
That's excellent. And unfortunately, our time is short, Simon. Trust me, I could ask
Sure, yeah.
a million more questions. It's an absolute honor to be able just to speak with you, period. And I love the movie. It was very fun, very on target, so to speak, just to stick with our
Great,
assessment, of course.
great. I'm glad you liked it. Thanks, Derek. It's great to talk to you.
No, pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much, Simon. Best of luck with everything. Hope you have a good one.
Thank you. Take care, Derek.
This is Derek Scarzella. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching or enduring. If you're feeling generous or even just mildly entertained, please like, subscribe, and comment to support the channel. I know you've got opinions. Don't even try to deny it. Drop them in the comments. Argue with me. Argue with each other. You are officially invited to engage in glorious internet combat. You can also find me on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Instagram's awkward little brother, and the granddaddy of them all, Facebook. Oh, and while I've still got your attention, my novels The Vicious Game and Knuckle Crack Bone are up on Amazon. They're unapologetically gritty, punch-you-in-the-face crime stories with rave reviews. If you give them a shot, I'd be honored. Thank you again for watching. Rest well, hero. You're home.